got everything we need. A frying pan, some oil for your latke recipe. Let's celebrate our victory. We've got the latke recipe.
So today I wanted to talk a little bit about the potatoes, the great potato or the lowly potato as some know it, and how it affects kosher, and specifically as we are getting ready for Chanuka and we're going to be having a lot of potato latkes. So let's start with a potato. Does potato have to be kosher? No. It comes from the ground. It doesn't have any bugs in there, and by itself it's kosher. However, like many things in kosher, when you process something, there are many parts that go into it, and therefore we need to think about what goes into processing a potato latke. So one of the things that are very interesting in kosher law is something called Bishul Yisrael. There are three things that require something to be Bishul Yisrael, which means that the mashgiach, the rabbi, the Jew, takes part of the cooking, and that is something that is required in kosher on specific items. And it basically comes down to the following. In order for something to require Bishul Yisrael for kosher, it has to be something that is not eaten raw. So let's say I would be making a baked apple. Apples can be eaten raw, so it does not require Bishul Yisrael. But something that people generally do not eat raw, let's say eggs, meat, fish, something like that, that would be something that requires Bishul Yisrael, which means that the rabbi or the mashgiach would partake somehow in the cooking. Another important part of the law of Bishul Yisrael is it has to be something, as in Hebrew, called Ola al Shulchan Malachim, which means that it's something worthy to be served at a royal table. So eggs, fish, meat, those for sure are. But what about the potato? That's the great question of today. How fancy is a potato? As you can imagine, it will depend on where it was made and the time. The Aruch HaShulchan, who lived in Russia way back in the early 1900s or late 1800s, by him, he said potatoes. Potatoes are what we'll call the common folk would eat. They were cheap. They were easy to get. That's not something that would go on a royal table, although he did quote earlier sources that say in their area it will be. But what about today? What about not nowadays? How fancy is a potato? Well, it kind of varies. A potato chip, that's a snack. Certainly wouldn't go on a royal table. But what about mashed potatoes, a baked potato? That for sure will be part of a nice dinner, a state dinner, a fancy dinner. So how do we look at this? And with this, the poskim, the halacha, look at the various points of exactly how it's served. And what I mean is the following. Is this something that you cook by how it's cooked? And it's the type of way it's made. So what I mean is, do we decide that it goes by the actual thing, which is a potato, or the way it's made? So if we decide that Bishul Yisrael is required on the specific item, like the potato, it doesn't make a difference how you do it. Whether you fry it, whether you make potato chips, large, mashed, spiked, whatever you want to do, it doesn't make a difference. It needs to be Bishul Yisrael. And if it doesn't have Bishul Yisrael, not only is it non-kosher, it will make your pots and pans non-kosher. So for example, you asked somebody in your house that's a non-Jewish help to make the potatoes, mashed potatoes for you, and they made it from beginning to end, your pot would not be kosher according to that law. Others will say, well, it depends how you do it. So yes, while we will say potato chips won't be a problem, and therefore many factories indeed make potato chips without Jewish part of the cooking, without Bishul Yisrael, and many shkachos rely on that, but something of better quality, we'll call it, like mashed potatoes or whatnot, then they would require it. And that seems to be the majority of the major agencies' approach. Others disagree with that. So let's focus a little bit on the potato latke. Potato latke is made differently. Basically, you take potatoes, you cook them up, and you then mash it. You have that consistency. Then you add the oil, you add the eggs, you add whatever you would like in there, some spices, and you make a latke. You make a pancake, right? That seems to be, according to almost everybody, is something that will need Bishul Yisrael. So if you're in your home, and again, you're asking, you have some help, whether maybe you're making a big party and you're hiring some waiters or some non-Jewish cooks to help you out, be extremely careful. If you give them the task of making the potato latkes from scratch, you need to make sure that you are involved in turning on the fire and being part of that. Otherwise, as I said earlier, your pans or your frying pan cannot be kosher. And not only that, of course, you can't eat the food. But what about in a commercial way? So here's a fascinating insight into how kosher works. We at the CRC, as an example, certify a company called Kashrus. That they're downtown Chicago, and they make all types of delicious pierogies and blintzes and latkes, pancakes as they call them. And all of these things need to be Bishul Yisrael, need to have the rabbi's involvement. But it's pretty hard to be there every time they want to start every morning to turn on all of their equipment. It's hard to get there. It's costly. How do we go about this? So here's an insight into how we at an agency utilize today's technology in order to accomplish this. You know what we do? Every single morning, the rabbi in our office gets up early and he does something which we call the shame machine, which is connected by his phone. He calls in a number. He has the number and he has the code, and only he has access to turning on remotely the boiler in Kashrus. So he calls it in, and all the employees are waiting around. When the rabbi calls in, the boiler goes up. The same thing goes on for the blintzes maker. The same thing goes on for the griddle that makes the latkes that we're talking about, and hopefully we'll all enjoy for Chanuka. All of these things are controlled remotely by us in our office or the rabbi's cell phone. Rabbi Oppenheimer from our office is in charge of that, and he religiously every morning makes sure, and trust me, if he forgets, he knows about it because the company's calling, hello, we need to go to work, turn on our stuff. So that is one of the great ways that technology works in making our potato latkes, and Kashrus therefore can continue to be kosher to the highest standard. I'll just talk about one other thing. Certainly we talked about potato chips. What about French fries? Huge issue. Because French fries is kind of interesting the way they make it. They cut the potatoes and they cook it just a little bit, maybe a third, depending on each factory, in order that it's cooked enough to allow the consumer to further finish the cooking in whether their house or their restaurant. So, you know what? This is what we do when we walk into French fries factories that are looking to go kosher. We take the French fry and we kind of chew it to see, is this considered cooked? Is it not considered cooked? Most of the cases, honestly, turn out that they are more than 1/3 cooked, which is the cutoff for considered Michael Bender soy, which is the cutoff that we consider to be needing Bishul Yisrael. And therefore, unless there's a rabbi there involved in cooking it, turning on the boilers in the French fries factory, we would not be able to certify it. There are variables, every company's different, but it's a fascinating insight into how a French fries company. So you cannot just assume, oh, it's French fries, raw potatoes, what could be my problem? It doesn't have a hefsher in it. Let me go ahead and buy it, and I'll, of course, make it in my own kitchen. Please note that it may be already bishul akum, and you cannot reverse it necessarily by cooking it yourself. So there you go, a small snapshot into what goes into making a potato latke. Enjoy, and happy Chanuka to all.
Tonight is Hanukkah, got everything we need. A frying pan.
Vegetable oil requires certification for year-round and for Pesach, not because the vegetables have any concerns of their own, but because the equipment that they're made on could potentially be used for things that are not kosher or are not kosher for Pesach. An exception to that rule is extra virgin olive oil, which is produced without any heat, and as a result, it would not have any concerns of the equipment that it's made of. And therefore, the CRC recommends, as do many other hashkachas, that you can use it for year-round and for Pesach, even if it has no special certification, assuming that it's truly extra virgin olive oil. Now, from time to time, people raise concerns about this, and they say they've heard all kinds of things about how these are extra virgin olive oil is adulterated, and I just want to respond or comment on those concerns. Those concerns begin with a report that came out from the University of California at Davis, UCD, in July 2010. They were reported by a person named Tom Mueller, who reported about how there's adulteration and there's all kinds of issues with all kinds of things that are not correct in the olive oil industry. We've seen that study. We don't believe that that's enough reason for us to change our position. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Of course, a simple reason is that there is government oversight, there's industry oversight to make sure people don't adulterate or put things into the olive oil that's not the way it's supposed to be. Further is that in 2011, the same university, UCD, made another study of the same items, and they found that there's actually three things that they found that were wrong with olive oil. The first is the reason it's sold as extra virgin, but it's really oxidized from heat and age, and it doesn't have the properties that people are expecting from extra virgin olive oil. Second is it might be intermingled with refined olive oil and not be pure extra virgin. And the third is that it might be made from low quality olives, either from the olives that were inherently low quality or they were stored improperly or other things like that, that make them not suitable to be designated as extra virgin olive oil. Now, of those three concerns, it's the middle one that has the potential for being a kashrus concern. If a refined oil is put into it, as I mentioned, refined oils need to have hashgacha because of the equipment that they're made on. It's a little less of a Pesach concern, actually, because there are no chametz oils, per se, essentially. There are kitnius oil, that's a small concern, but there aren't many concerns. And even they who did these studies found that second concern, that other oils are mixed in, is a very small part of the problems they were finding in oils. Most of the problems they were finding were oils that were truly extra virgin olive oil, but they weren't the quality that people were expecting when they buy that kind of oil. Afterwards, someone brought suit on the olive oil industry based on the findings of UCD, and the suit was thrown out because they could never replicate even the findings that University of California had when they did this research. And then, in addition, there's a trade organization called the North American Olive Oil Association, NAOA, and they said that when they looked into it, they found the adulterations with other oils is very rare. The people who are doing the adulteration are the smallest players in the market, people with less than 2% of the full market share for this product. And the testing that they were doing, the testing that UCD did to come to this conclusion was actually tests that the rest of the world, the International Olive Council, rejects. They also use other sensory tests that are done by people who were very biased. That is to say, they had an interest in promoting their own oil rather than the imported oil. And therefore, the NAOA does not find any merit to these concerns. And therefore, they feel comfortable, and therefore we feel comfortable telling people that if olive oil is extra virgin, it's pure extra virgin olive oil, it's okay to use for year-round, it's okay to use for Pesach, even if it doesn't carry a kosher certification.